Chapter 1. Iron Deku. Flashing red and blue lights. Radio chatter in the distance. It's for your own good. Fuck you, I'm fine. No, you're not. Underage drinking is a crime, and you are an alcoholic. I'm not an alcoholic.
I'm Iron Man.
Midoriya, please get help. Author's notes. Yes, this is short. It was just a tired thought. Everyone does a what if Izuku was X-hero. So I decided, what if he was Iron Man? That includes the always overlooked, Tony Stark is an alcoholic. Now that's fine for an adult, but Izuku is 15. That would cause problems instead. The content of these stories is solely to either be humorous or just a one-off idea that wouldn't fit a whole story. Sometimes it might be a writing prompt I have been mulling over in my head that I can't quite articulate. The omake for a magician's secret will be on a different story. All these will take a back seat to updates on the stories I am writing, so updates for these are a sort of whenever the mood strikes me. 34 Chapter 2 Quirk Strength. As the girls sat in the dorms doing homework, it's genealogy of quirk development and hereditary traits. So basically, how quirks get passed down from parent to child and how mutations on the quirks can happen. As such, the girls all requested Momo's help, and it was going well until Mina had a thought after reading a passage in her text. So, hey, if I'm reading this right, displaying the page to the girls, doesn't this say guys have stronger quirks? This comment ground the other discussions to a halt. What are you talking about? Momo asked. Right here, pointing to the page. Doesn't this say that men's quirks develop more to an extreme than it does to a mean? Everyone turned to the page Mina brought up. Well, it does say that statistically men are more likely to be an extreme. That doesn't preclude them from being closer to average, or that women can't also hit those same extremes, Karo. Ribbited Tsuyu. Okay, but let's think about the guys in our class. Midoriya, Todoroki, and Bakugo are obviously on the far end of powerful quirks, while Mineta and Zero are pretty weak compared. Uraraka added. Now hang on, let's think about this for a second. What even is power? Hagakure had to ask. Sure, we can look at those three and just know that is what power is, but I think of us the only one with as much destructive power as Jiro, and even then she needs to gear to start coming close to the power that some of the guys can put out. Hey, what about me? Also, isn't this discussion worthless? Jiro barked out. What do you mean? Momo inquired. This discussion was still somewhat on topic to their homework, so she allowed it to continue, and she did also have a slight interest in it as well. What I mean, Jiro continued, is that this is a hero school. Obviously, it will take those whose quirks hit more towards the high end in terms of power, which we still haven't even defined yet. So using the guys as a sample isn't right, since we can't really compare our quirks to theirs. This got a few nods from the other girls. Yeah, you're right, Mina agreed. We need to compare similar quirks to each other. So who do we know who have similar quirks? Sato and Midoriya have similar quirks, Tu croaked out. Yeah, but we all know who's stronger of the two of them. Momo concluded. Kirishima and Tetsu have similar quirks. Uraraka stated. Too similar. We saw them at the sports festival. They might as well be clones. Cloning, pondered Hagakure. That's IT, she shouted. What's it? Asked Mina. Cloning, that jerk from 1B has a cloning quirk. So all we need to do is get him to use our quirks and see if he does it stronger. Hagakure stated. Right? It's probably the closest we are going to get to an answer. Jiro finished. Unless anyone wants to ask Todoroki how he compares to his brothers and sisters. Everyone inwardly cringed at the idea of opening that mess of family drama. Now we just kindly ask him to replicate our quirks. 2 hours later. Let's never do that again, whined Mina, which was agreed upon unanimously. 5 minutes later. Hey, you ever wonder why? Only to be interrupted by everyone throwing a book at the pink-skinned girl. Author's notes. This was more of an observation I noticed. Most of the guys have strong quirks, Todoroki, Midoriya, and Bakugo. Then the top 3 pros were All Might, Endeavor, and Best Jeanist. 2 of the big 3 were guys, and the 8 precepts of Death and League of Villains are all guys excepting Himiko. Now there are some problems with my observation, besides Midoriya and Todoroki, who get their quirks from their parents. Yes, Dad might. But beyond Tetsu and Kirishima, which seemed to me played more as a joke than for serious. No one really has similar quirks. There isn't someone who can move fast, but maybe not as fast as Ida, or someone else who makes acid like Mina does. So the problem with that idea is that we don't really have comparable quirks to gauge this off of, which is obvious. They don't need to write another character who has X's quirk but weaker, as that would make no sense to have that character. So canon explanation is out. However, there was going to be second part to this, but it felt more like a retread. Why do more of the guys' quirks seem inherently offensive? Though looking at it, a higher percentage of the girls, in 1A, have offensive quirks. Defining offensive quirk, a quirk that by just the activation alone begins causing damage to the surrounding area. So Mina begins making acid and Jiro starts emitting pulses. While with the guys, Todoroki, Bakugo, Kaminari are the only with quirks that by turning them on causes damage. So the idea was somewhat self-defeating. There was no way to test it, but I still think it would be interesting on the idea that of the guys we see, they tend to have a higher level of power in the quirk itself, or their quirk has very low power and they have to be creative with it. Now, obviously a place like UA would want people on the extreme, one way or another, so someone with an okay quirk probably wouldn't make it in. But if they could design like a power level system, and then we can see how many people have quirks that would be beyond what a quirkless person could replicate with $20 at a Walmart. As for the ending, no, there is no official what happened when they asked. It's up to you to decide how that ended. Till next, stupid idea. Also, anything that hits the Drabble chapters is fair game if someone wanted to make a story out of it. Not that you need my permission or anything. Chapter 3, Adult Situations. As the girls of UA sat down in Hagakuri's dorm, it was something they did at least every other Saturday, to talk about girl stuff. Usually the topic of the boys comes up, but today a different topic was proposed. So who has used their quirk for fun times? Asked Ishido as the other girls stopped and tried to either not blush or tried to think about what they meant. Well, whatever do you mean, Mina? Coughed Momo, trying and failing to hide her blush. You all know what I mean. Who has used their quirk to help them when they get stressed? Minnie started looking around the room. I can't. Any toys would melt if I didn't control it. Gets really frustrating when I just want to release, but I guess that counts as training too. At this point, Jairu sputtered as she was trying to pretend this conversation wasn't happening, so she nearly choked on her drink at the image that Mina was portraying. Well, I can't use my quirk for that. Squeaked out a reply from Eureka as she tried to make herself smaller than she was. Everyone else surprised that she was the first to reply to Mina's rather crude question. Go on, share some more. Squealed Hagakuri. Well, if I don't pay attention, I start to float a bit. Her blush overtaking her face as she starts becoming more uncomfortable with the idea of sharing. Raising her hand, Jairu responds with, Sometimes I use my jacks too. Well? As she trailed off, the other girls gasped. That's so intimate, Karo replied to. At least I'm not the only one who will use their body in that way. Ishido rounded on her. Does that mean you?
Mina implied.
Yesh, I ush my tongue, as she extended her tongue a good few feet out. At this point, Momo can't keep it in anymore and blurted out. Sometimes I make things inside me. She then buried her face into the pillow next to her. I'm not proud of it, she mumbled to the crowd, as she got up to run out of the room to hide in her own. Wow, I didn't think. Ochako responded. Damn, was all Mina could respond with. Hagakuri, you've been quiet. Jairu brought to the attention of everyone. You do anything with your quirk? All the time, Hagakuri giggled. Especially in class. I mean, I'm naked almost all the time, and no one could see my arms. As long as I stay quiet, no one is the wiser. She shifted on her bed, leaving a dark mark on it. At this revelation that Hagakuri was into voyeurism and was maybe doing something right in front of them, the other girls' sensibilities kicked in and they too vacated the room, leaving alone Invisible Girl to her own literal devices. As the girls walked to their respective rooms, Mina, in her normal foot and mouth fashion, asked, Do you think the guys use theirs too, you know? No one answered that question. Coincidentally, down in the common room, a set of spiky hair asked a question. Hey, any of you guys jerk off using your quirks? The most surprising thing happened. A certain head of green hair responded, Fucking oh. And rip my dick off, are you insane? Author's notes. I'm sorry, I truly am. This idea popped up and I had to write it. I am not proud of it. I just think no one else wants to talk about people with superpowers using them for more personal activities. Chapter 4. My Pokemon Academia. I cannot believe you talked me into this. Katsuki grumbled. Come on, it's not too bad. Kaminari replied. Of course, you'd say that. You get to be the cute mascot, Katsuki snapped to his contemporary. It's not my fault I'm adorable. Kaminari beamed. I'll show you adorable. He threatened, moving to lunge at the other boy. Hey, knock it off, Uraraka shouted. This is what you get for breaking into my room and going through my stuff. Huffing and tapping her foot on the floor, so get a move on and then you'll be free. Katsuki began muttering threats under his breath while Kaminari bounded out of the room, Uraraka following behind them. Both boys moved into their places, opposite each other. Suddenly battle music began playing from a boombox and Mina walked out from behind a curtain in the common room, turned a hat backwards on her head, which was impressive since it didn't get caught in her horns. Pikachu, I choose you.
Mina shouted.
Kaminari rushed out in front of her, and in as cute of a voice as he could, chirped out a Pika. Go Voltorb. Giggle Uraraka. At which Bakugo shuffled out wearing a gigantic red and white ball. Sighing to himself, he softly gave his battle cry, Voltorb. Oh Bakugo-san, please give it your best. Uraraka admonished him. It's embarrassing, he whined. At least it's just us here. Mina said, winking to a corner where Momo had set up a video feed that reached into the cafeteria, where the rest of the first-year students were watching. Let's just get this over with. Bakugo yelled. Pikachu used Thunderbolt. Mina waved her arm in an impressive manner. Kaminari replied with a Pikachu as he discharged a small amount of lightning at his opponent. Ow! Damn it, that stings, Bakugo barked at Kaminari. Voltorb used self-destruct. Uraraka managed to get out between bouts of laughter. Go fuck yourself. He turned and berated his master. Oh, come on, you just have to do one attack, and then you can be done. So, make it good. Uraraka stamped her foot. Oh, I'll give you a good self-destruct, all right? A murderous gleam in his eye. Voltorb. He shouted with all his might as he tackled the blonde boy to the ground. Across the campus, the students in the cafeteria suddenly felt the building shake and the video feed cut out. Author's notes. Not my best work, but had this stupid idea that the kids would eventually use their quirks to imitate Pokemon. Sure, it's like 200 years in the future or some shit, but still it's Japan and I don't see Pokemon going away that soon. To determine types.
Mina. Poison.
Tsu. Water/grass. Kaminari. Electric. Kirishima. Rock/fighting. Todoroki. Ice/fire. Midoriya. Fighting. Tokoyami. Dark/flying. How the students don't have too bad of typing. Might revisit this and see how other heroes and villains stack up. All Might and All for One battle using their students/disciples as Pokemon. Chapter 5 Origin Story, sort of. Izuku's Incredible Origins. I finally got you, Mini-Might. Cackled Shigaraki. Izuku struggled against the bonds that wrapped around him as he dangled over a vat of bubbling, boiling acid. You'll never get away with this, Shigaraki, he grunted. I'm a hero. That means I always win in the end. Not this time. He gripped the rope suspending. He paused, though, on reflection. I do want to know one thing, though. Where do you get your powers from? Izuku froze. He needed to buy time. But could he really chance giving up the secret to his incredible power? If you won't tell me, it's not skin off my bones. He placed 4 fingers on the rope. Wait, Izuku shouted. I'll tell you. Shigaraki crouched low on the catwalk of the abandoned warehouse that all villains used as a secret base. Really? Yes, Izuku swung back and forth. But I have to start at the beginning. It's a long story. We have the time. Well, it all began when I was found in a crater in the woods, Izuku flashed back. A nice farmer couple who had no children of their own found and wanted to adopt me. I was next to a strange metal box. Eyes wide. You're an alien. Izuku sputtered. What no? He continued his story. My mom came by and got B from the elderly couple. I had wandered off from the tour group she signed up for. But then a few years later, I was on a field trip to a science laboratory. They had been experimenting on the effects of radiation in animals. Apparently, one of the spiders had gotten out and bit me, he reminisced, which gave you the strength and speed of a spider. Shigaraki concluded. Nope, Izuku answered. I got a 4-week hospital stay. Grunting. Okay, so then what happened? I was walking home. Kachin had been really mean to me that day. Izuku remembered back when Bakugo was less nice. I bumped into the bald, robed woman, and she was battling these wizards and using magic and stuff. And she took you as an apprentice and taught you the ancient arcane arts. Dude, you can't just teach magic. Izuku laughed. You have to already be magic. Then what? Shigaraki raged. It was a few years ago. I had been walking to a nearby shop. I was going to get some katsudon when an unmarked black van pulled up. Izuku rocked back and forth to keep the blood flowing properly. Okay, that's creepy. Right? Turns out it was for a government experiment, Izuku agreed. They were getting people to test a serum to make them into super soldiers. So that's how. He started before being cut off. Nope. They realized I was a kid and looked nothing like the guy they were supposed to pick up, so they sent me home. He frowned. What were his tax dollars going towards? Are you messing with me? Because it sounds like you're messing with me. The villain glared at his captive. Swear to God, all true. Izuku responded. I'd cross my heart, but he wiggled in his bindings. Anyway, where was I? Government experiment. Right. So I was having the worst day of my life until I find this strange goo on the ground. It would move around and stuff. It was a symbiotic creature that enhanced and gave you amazing abilities. Shaking his head. Not it was just some scientist's experiment to make some new kind of energy. Instead, he made a bouncy gel. Dragging his hands across his face. Okay, and then what happened? I had decided to go train in the mountains, thinking I could get strong by repeating an intense workout every day for years. And that worked? For like a week. Then the fact that I wasn't letting my body rest. I spent a few weeks in physical therapy to undo all the damage I had done to my body by overworking it. Izuku laughed. Last time I take lifestyle advice from a manga. You better start getting to the point real soon, kid. Shigaraki snarled. I'm getting there. So as I was coming home from my latest stint in the hospital, apparently getting stuck by lightning while carrying a chemistry set does not let you run really fast, just a bunch of chemical burns. Izuku realized his bizarre luck. So I stumbled over this orange ball that had 7 gold stars in it, and I found a 6 more of the year. Excited, the villain babbled. And it let you summon a magical wish-granting dragon that gave you the powers you have. What? Izuku questioned the sanity of his captor. Are you serious? No, they were custom baseballs the local team was using to practice. I did meet a player who managed to get to the big leagues. Oh, which one? Intrigued at this little factoid. Sighing, the one who got caught using steroids. Oh, that one. A lot of people were pissed at that, finding it completely screwed up the season when the results came out. But anyway, I was just about to give when I found it, the true source of my power. Shigaraki was gleeful. Finally, after all this talking, hearing unbelievable circumstance after circumstance, he would finally know his nemesis' source of power. The wall blew out from behind him, and his classmates rushed in, overwhelming the singular villain with their collective power. With Shigaraki unconscious and Izuku freed from his bindings, he was pulled into a hug by his friends. I'm so glad you guys came to get me. I was this close to revealing the secret of how I got my powers. Dude, it's not really a secret if we see you do it every Friday night, Kirishima stated. Blushing, the green-haired boy thought back to all the times he was caught in his room, working his body to the image of Richard Simmons, sweating to the oldies. Author's notes: what if there was a character who had every cliché origin story for a superhero, but also had none of the powers? This story answers the age-old question no one was asking. And I'm too drunk for this. Let me go home, Mr. Hollywood. My family misses me. Coming this summer to a gas station bathroom near you. Chapter 6, Thought Slayer. I present to you the real reason why All Might and One for All fight. All Might swells up in size. Nana Shimura was a queen, as he takes a fighting pose. One for All steps out of a shadow, he arm morphing into a monstrosity. She breathed. She was a THOOTTT. Author's notes. I will not apologize for this. Chapter 7. WTF Writers. Izuku walked up to the bicolored-haired boy. Okay, what did you want to talk about? He asked. Your quirk, it's like All Might's, he coldly stated. Are you his secret love child? Are you drunk right now? Izuku laughed out. My quirk similar to All Might's? Before dropping to his knees, wiping a tear from his eye. Dude, I have pyrokinesis. Literally, my quirk is the ability to control cheese. Todoroki looked down at the floor, embarrassed for such a stupid comment. Well, you don't have to laugh at me. Haha, sorry, it's just, why would you think I was his love child? Izuku asked. He spends so much time focusing on you in class. Todoroki defended himself. Because I have the strangest quirk out of everyone else in heroics. Of course, I need a bit more attention to figure out how to use it. Izuku answered as he pulled out a box of crackers and block of fancy cheese. Now how about we just go have a snack before we make fools of ourselves on national television, huh? Todoroki shrugged. That sounds nice actually. Hey, want to hear about all my family drama? Yeah, okay. Then we can talk about how much of a dick Bakugo was to me as a child. Author's notes. This was me poking fun at the idea that people use the canon discussion between Todoroki and Izuku. It's fine. But when Izuku has a drastically different quirk, do not just have Todoroki use the same lines of dialogue. He looks retarded when he does so. Change it up, people. Sure, the dialogue is cool, but come on, people. For the less cultured reader, pyrokinesis is otherwise known as cheese manipulation. Review. Shadow Phoenix 16. I said I wouldn't apologize, and I meant it. It was, however, one of my less intelligent ideas. Chapter 8. The Greatest Hero. The blaring reverb of an old pre-quirk boombox rang in the hall. Students and teacher alike stuck their heads out of classrooms to ascertain why someone was sprinting through the halls, making such a cacophony. Bakugo-san, Yururika shouted to the boy who was wearing earplugs for some reason. What's going on? Where's Deku? Bakugo ignored or just couldn't hear the brunette, so she grabbed him by his shoulders. What is that noise? She mouthed to him. The fucking nerd decided all the greatest heroes need a theme song. Bakugo snarled. Content that was a sufficient explanation. Okay, but what the hell is Pepsi? She shouted to him as Deku completed his fourth lap around the school, Ida trying desperately to catch up and turn off the accursed device. But Deku in his silver and blue costume proved too quick, too agile, too thirsty to stop. In, as the sound faded out down the hall. Author's notes. No one can stop the world's greatest superhero. Whenever there is a thirst to quench, wherever there are boxes to leap over or living rooms to run through, he will be there. Whenever someone needs to rub a bottle of carbonated sugar water in an inappropriate manner, he will be there. He does this not because he is wanted, or needed, or even liked, but because of his love of Pepsi. This summer, Izuku Midoriya is Pepsi Man. Chapter 9. Harem Quirk. Midoriya woke up to his alarm. Quickly, he turned his head and noted the time, 5 a.m., good. He hurried out of bed and washed and dressed in record time as he sprinted out the door, ducking a quick body that flung itself at him. He knew the stairs were a death trap, so he flung himself from the third-floor walkway that his apartment was on and rolled his landing to keep his momentum and prevent him from shattering his bones. The distance from his home to school was one that could be walked in about 15 minutes, 10 if you hurried. Izuku sprinted it in under 3. He could hear the massive footsteps from behind him, and he had to instinctively duck, dodge, push and shove anyone or anything that got in his way. He slid into the doors and in a fluid motion put his shoes and other belongings in his locker and continued moving until he was in his desk. Even as he could hear the pounding on the windows, he did not look or even acknowledge their presence. He just had to wait until the teacher showed up for class to begin. The day went like any other. The teacher said words that no one listened to, and Izuku watched the clock. As soon as the bell rung, he was already out of his seat, and he picked a non-conventional exit. Crawling out of the sewer like a common criminal, Izuku dusted himself off. Not today. Oh, look what I found, a new disguise, he heard a voice behind him say. Fuck, he thought to himself. Oh my god, the new person gasped. I have to have you. Izuku instead knew what to expect. It had been like this every day of his life since he was 4. Some might consider it a blessing have a quirk like his, but how was he supposed to get anything done? Izuku ducked and rolled as the slimy tendrils tried everything they could to snatch him up, until another new voice rang out, this one chilling Izuku to the bone. How the hell am I going to get away from this one? I am here, the powerful tone of All Might shouted. Don't worry, citizen, I will stop. Oh my goodness. The hero's voice changing. Izuku had enough on his plate dealing with the daily attacks, but how was he supposed to fend off the number one? He didn't even know what the hero's quirk was, just that it was powerful. Somehow his day ended with him getting a second quirk, but he still wasn't sure if it would be enough to save himself from his own life. Izuku sighed as he got out of bed again, already hearing the pounding on the doors. Author's notes. Like the title suggests, Izuku has a quirk, one that attracts a harem to him. Poking fun at the Izuku gets a harem in so many stories. I'm not against it really. Some of the harem stories are pretty good, but I just thought it would be funny if that was his quirk. I made sure to be intentionally vague about the genders of everyone but Izuku, so it could be a Rule 63 universe, dudes, gals, both, what have you. Just that his quirk attracts him a harem, not like a 4-year-old would know what to do with one if he had it. So Izuku had to develop a skill set so he doesn't get dragged into an alleyway. If I were to write this as a serious story, I think that would actually be fun to do. Just how does someone grow up with a quirk like that? Some stories focused on unconventional quirks and how you grow up with them. If a 4-year-old got a quirk that makes people attracted to them, that could develop into some weird shit. Would probably be squicky to write, so I might not. Don't need to spend time writing about a bunch of people taking a 4-year-old to keep as the master in a harem. Thinking too hard about this topic goes to a weird place. Should have just left it at a funny idea. Chapter 10, Rule 63. Oh man, is it good to be back to normal again? Midoriya cheered as he walked into homeroom on a chilly August morning. Izuku took his seat and then marked his name off the board. The only names remaining were Shoji, Sato, and Mineta. I got 3 snack packs on Sato, Kaminari announced. No way it's going to be Shoji, and I'll raise you 2 king-size Snickers. Momo held up a couple of wrapped chocolates. As the students in the class began placing bets on their classmates, now with so few left, the spot gets split among many people now, so it forms as sort of a potluck more than anything. Izuku pondered on what led to this strange incident. Mitsuki-chan, Izuku quickly hissed when he saw his secret paramour walk right into class one morning, dressed in Bakugo's school uniform which was stretched to bursting against her large assets. What are you doing here? We can't be seen together. Kachin will flip if he finds out. Oi, Deku, if I find out what? And since when are you our first-name basis with my mother? Katsuki snarled as the woman who Izuku believed to be the mother of his old bully turned out to somehow be a gender-swapped version of said bully. Kachin. Izuku shrieked as he struggled to break free of the deathly grip on his collar. Dude, what? No way! Kirishima shouted as he vaulted over rows of desks to land hard next to his bro. How are you? Were you always a chick? Fucking shitty hair, of course not. Some jerks on the late train were fighting and I got hit by their quirks. Apparently it just changed my gender. They said it would last a day though. Bakugo yelled so everyone in the classroom could hear him explain. That was after I kicked both of their asses for dragging me into fight. So for today only, Mineta slurped. You have all the goodies that a lady has? Bakugo, a teenager with a reputation of doesn't afraid of anything, slowly backed away from the lustful gaze of the purple pervert, something that hadn't been directed at him before. If you try and touch me, there won't be enough of you left to bury. Aizawa walked in a moment later, took a look at one of his students. Bakugo, go to the nurse. If she clears you, then you can come back. It wasn't until the next day when Bakugo walked in as he normally was that Izuku remembered that there was a second quirk fired, a viral quirk that spread amongst others in a chain. Jairu slowly and awkwardly walked into class and tapped Aizawa on the shoulder. Sir, I think I have a problem. Mineta, being the only person who would notice such minute differences, immediately called out. Jairu's tits shrunk. Ahaha. Shut the fuck up, she screeched at him. Sorry, but, it seems I might have been turned into a, boy. Can I go home now? Aizawa looking back at Bakugo. I didn't do nothing. Before look at Jairu. Bakugo, you go with her to the nurse's office. Something went from you to her. And we need to find out what, the teacher ordered. An hour later, Jairu and Bakugo walked back into class. For some reason, he was comforting her gently. They were trailed by the slow-moving recovery girl. Attention, students. To my knowledge, I have determined that when Bakugo was hit by the gender-swapping quirk, he was also struck by a viral quirk which bonded and is now transferring itself around the classroom. It seems to have a short time of work, so you will only be affected for 24 hours, and then it will pass itself onto someone else, and since you all were the first in contact with Bakugo, she mumbled something under her breath about lazy writers before continuing. It will only stay within you 20 students. It doesn't affect your quirks, so you are cleared to participate in normal school activities. And thus the conversation started, eventually leading to someone making a bet that someone else would be next. For a lot of students, it was just something to do, and for the others it allowed them to see what an alternate reality version of themselves would look like. Some of the students would even admit to taking the temporary bodies for a test drive, so to speak, and others talked about whether they were surprised or disappointed about some of the changes. When it was Hagakure's turn, she admitted that she was disappointed that no one could see if she was hotter as a guy or not. Mina lamented that she looked too much like her older brother. Momo was incredibly tight-lipped about whether her breast size translated to any other part of her body. Todoroki, in typical fashion, was practically unfazed, though he came in with a sick braid that he simply stated, "My sister wanted to do my hair for once, so I let her. And my dad refused to look me in the eye, so today's a pretty good day all in all." When it came to Kirishima's turn, he tried to join in on the heroics class, but was sent away after he stepped out of the temporary changing room for whomever was affected at the time, and his bandolier vest covering absolutely nothing of his new assets. It was crazy during the next few days, and a lot of people didn't feel the gender swap mattered all that much with All Might's retirement and them moving into the dorms. For Izuku, that was a blessing because he had some alone time with a blonde mother who admitted she experimented in college and wouldn't mind retaking that exam. But Izuku was one of the last, with 3 left. Apparently even a few of the teachers threw in a small bag of candy on a bet here and there when they got told what was happening. The door opened and Shoji and Sato walked in together, to the chagrin of most of the class, as that meant Mineta was the current swapped student. "Where is Mineta anyway?" Ojiro asked. At that, Midoriya began shivering. Todoroki, who was standing next to him, looked to make sure his quirk didn't activate for some reason. "Midoriya, are you all right?" A tear welled in the green-haired boy's eye. "Mineta is next door to me, and he... so many noises. Unholy noises." Author's notes. So I read a lot of what if this character was a girl or this character was a boy. And it's usually Izuku, Bakugo, or Todoroki who gets swapped. So I thought, why not let everyone get it? Then I realized Mineta wouldn't leave his room, and that's disgusting. I made it a 24-hour, so you just have a day to see what it's like. Some would take it in stride, others not really affected. I also tossed in Izuku x Mitsuki because I just felt like doing one MILF story. Since I don't have plans to do a proper one, there's plenty of the smutty stories already, and that ain't my cup of tea for writing. Just thought I'd put in my 2 cents on the whole thing. Whoever stories.
Chapter 11, De Ahead.
Anyone seen Midoriya or Bakugo? Aizawa called out to the rest of the class as he finished up attendance. "I am here," Izuku proudly shouted as he walked into 1A this morning. "Might as well own it." "Oh." Aizawa quirked his eyebrow as he saw the toddler walk into the room. "My..." Aoyama's eyes twinkled in mischief. "Gosh." Ida pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. The shock of seeing his friend who had been reduced to small child, causing him to use what he considered coarse language. "Ik." Momo squealed and dived at Izuku, before pulling his little body to her chest, cradling him. "Izuku-san, you are so cute." The girls of 1 are running over and passing Izuku around to each other, so they could cuddle him and brush his hair. Aizawa walked over to them, and they paused. "Midoriya, explain." "So I want to preface this by saying, I did not pick this fight," Izuku said firmly, which as a little child all the girls found adorable. He found himself sat on Jairu's lap as she twirled her earlobes through his hair, while brief flashes of light as Momo had produced a high-definition camera to take photos with. Her time spent on her internship provided one benefit of speaking with the photography company about their equipment. I was calmly minding my own business when out of nowhere, Kaken, Izuku continued his story before crackling pops came from behind him. "Oi, little nerd, don't go blaming this on me." Bakugo snarled as he stomped his way into the room, dragging a scared Eri with him. Kaken, don't be mean to Deku, Eri pleaded as she looked into Bakugo's furious eyes. Whoa, Uraraka said as she picked up Bakugo. It's so weird to see a little kid this angry. FFFFF. Ricken round face put me down, Katsuki ordered his classmate. So you see, I was trying to make Eri breakfast, which is why I was running late. Izuku resumed his explanation, finding himself in Tsu's large hands as Jiraiya went off to inspect little Bakugo. When Bakugo decided that blowing up the toaster was a good plan to make waffles. You're just mad that you didn't think of it first, Bakugo shot back. Izuku, electing to ignore the argument they had all the way up to the main building, finished his story, which startled Eri into setting off her quirk, which daged us. It's only temporary, I promise, Eri quickly cried out, fearing reprisal for using her quirk on someone else. Aizawa groaned and rubbed his nose. It hasn't even been a week since the last misadventure with you kids. The tired man just waved his hand. Fine, whatever. Take your seats. Izuku made to walk over to his desk when he was suddenly picked up and carried to the back of the room. Momo? Izuku quietly asked. Nope, I'm not done cuddling you yet, the blushing girl said firmly as she planted herself at her chair while he held Izuku tightly to her. Mina had grabbed Bakugo from Jiraiya and did the same. Oi, put me down. I'll kill you, Bakugo yelled as his hands crackled and popped. Mina pondered the threat for a moment. Nah, this is way too cool to pass up. Eri, who had her own little desk with crayons and drawings next to Aizawa's own, saw how the two boys were being held and quietly walked over to Aizawa's chair and climbed up onto his lap. She noticed how people were looking at her funny for sitting on their teacher, so she shouted, everyone else was doing it. I just wanted to be popular. Author's notes. Maybe I'll revisit this at some point, or do a companion chapter about Eri accidentally aging Izuku and Bakugo into adulthood. How does the school handle hunky Izuku showing up? Chapter 12, Sarcasm. Oh yeah, real tough Kachen. Stop it, damn it, Bakugo said as he fled away from the other 6-year-old. We're going to be the best heroes, Izuku flatly said as he ran after his running friend. Everyone's going to love us. Tears streaming down the blonde's cheeks. Leave me alone. Let's go save people, Kachen, Izuku stated, keeping pace with the boy. Izuku Midoriya was born with an amazing, well, a quirk, maybe. No one is entirely sure if he has one or not. Regardless, his ability is scathing. Quirk. Sarcasm. His sarcastic remarks are particularly personal and prey on the person's weaknesses. It's very upsetting. Author's notes. I got nothing. This was just kind of weird. Chapter 13. Daage Take 2. Let me preface this with, this was a random thought I had based on the Daage Drabble. Mom. A quiet voice called out into the silent hospital room. Rei Todoroki put down her book and stared at the door in confusion, the voice calling for her sounding so familiar. Mommy, it's me. The small voice spoke again. Shoto, Rei whispered in disbelief. She rose from her chair by the window, crossing the room to open the door to what had been her prison for the last decade. She looked into the hallway, expecting to see her youngest son, but there was no one there. A soft tug at her robes drew her gaze downward. This is temporary, but Shoto mumbled as he spoke to the floor. The small 4-year-old child tried to find the proper words to convey their message. My baby, Rei gasped as she knelt to pull her child into a hug. When she looked at his face, his pure, unburned face, she froze. I know, it's gone, at least for now, Shoto explained, but I want to make the most of it. Just like before it all went wrong, Rei squeaked out, tears streaming down her face. She guided her son into her room, holding his hand. Later in the evening, the returned 16-year-old hero looked at his sleeping mother who laid in his lap. The energy she spent just being around her son like nothing had gone wrong, being more activity than she had all month, tiring her immensely. He continued to stroke her hair as he watched her dozing face. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. I love you, Mom. Happy Mother's Day. Staring into the setting sun, he closed his eyes to get some rest. Author's notes. Hope y'all enjoyed this. Figured if Izuku and Bakugo became childlike, I should give Todoroki a chance to do something nice for his mother. Chapter 14. Shinso punished Bakugo. Shinso watched the strange green-haired boy from the sports festival. It wasn't enough that this boy beat him in the first round of the third event. Shinso stayed to watch his progress. He was in awe of the amount of power this kid had. A single flick and he could shatter massive glaciers. Shinso was truly jealous. But a second later he saw it, the ugly discoloration on the finger. Another matching it each time, he fired off a devastating flick. Shinso realized a greater truth. This boy's quirk was a curse. At least he could use it without breaking bones or shredding muscles. As a little kid, Shinso had once broken his wrist when he fell the wrong way. It still stands as the most physically painful experience of his life. And here was a person who was subjecting themselves to it, repeatedly, while smiling. I never had a chance, he muttered to himself. It was never about the quirk. This kid beat him without using his besides to break his damn finger to get out of his. He wanted it more. He was willing to go further than Shinso was. So over the next few days he watched this kid in the lunchroom, in the halls. Anytime he could catch a glance of him, Shinso would. And from an outsider looking in, from someone who had people constantly rag on him for his quirk and put him down, he came to a startling realization. Izuku Midoriya was being bullied. It wowed him in a sense, that someone so mind-bogglingly powerful would let anyone bully him, or that anyone would be so suicidally deranged to try and make an enemy of someone who might have been as strong as All Might. But the flinches, the stuttering, how he pulled away for a fraction of a second at people's touches, it all added up. This kid who actually believed in him, and if what he figured of the fight between him and Endeavor's son was true, then he was helping his opponent then as well. Shinso decided, let it not be said he doesn't stick up for a friend, even if he never really had anyone to call a friend before this. But all things begin somewhere. So Shinso waited. The day ran long. The sun began setting, and his target came to him like he planned. It was too easy really. Just have one of the 1A students deliver a note to that angry guy in 1A, who won and called everyone extras. All it had written on it was, fight me at the front gates after class, unless you're scared. And just like he predicted, the kid showed up, already spewing anger and foul language, which worked to Shinso's benefit. A single question and the kid was under his control. Then it was just a walk back. Shinso knew doing this would blow all his chances to make it to the hero course. Hell, he'd likely be expelled if not arrested for doing this, but he figured he should at least be able to use his quirk for good once in his life. He strode into the teacher's lounge with a near catatonic Bakugo stumbling behind him. A few teachers stood up in protest, while the 1A homeroom teacher, the principal Nizu, and the strange-looking skeletal man he'd never seen before eyed him warily. Shinso ignored them and faced Bakugo, who was still under his control. Bakugo, your order is to tell everyone in this room all the ways you have been bullying Izuku Midoriya. The teachers stopped their ranting about his illegal quirk use and silently stared at the ashen blonde boy. His mouth slowly opened and Bakugo began to speak. Shinso received a week's suspension for his illegal use of his quirk on another person. For some reason, the skeletal man took charge of the situation when the full extent of the bullying became apparent. The beatings, the destruction of property. The sick fuck actually tried to get Midoriya to kill himself at one point. But he shrugged at the punishment. I had to do something. My body began to move on its own, and by the time I realized what I was doing, I was too far in to stop or even want to. The following week, Shinso returned, and his homeroom teacher explained about his upcoming transfer to 1A. Seems there was a sudden opening after a student was removed from the course. Class, Aizawa said. Now that you have all returned from your internships, I would like to introduce your newest classmate who will be replacing Katsuki Bakugo. He informed his students to a large number of whispers. His name is Hitoshi Shinso, and he performed adequately enough during the sports festival to be moved into the hero course. Shinso eyed the room, seeing that the open chair was in front of Midoriya, who was looking nervous. The green-haired boy raised his bandaged arm, signifying that at some point again he had likely done something stupid to help someone who needed it. Sir, what, happened to Kaken? I mean, he started to say. We cannot discuss the details of another student's enrollment in UA without reasonable cause, Aizawa said loudly so everyone in his class could hear and understand. That being said, All Might and the principal wish to see you after lunch, Midoriya. Oh, okay, sir, Midoriya said quietly with a confused look on his face. Shinso sat down in front of him. Hey, Shinso. Izuku whispered once Aizawa had his back turned to write on the board. I'm glad you made it into the hero course. I think you'll do a great job helping people. Shinso smirked at that notion. Yes, Midoriya, I think I just might. Author's notes. Might be a bit bashy, but I thought it could be an interesting take as opposed to forgetting Shinso exists for like 150 or so chapters. I was always under the impression that after the sports festival they might shift students around, and with so many in 1B not even making it to the third event they would have swapped out some of them, or even a few 1A who didn't make it past the first round. Chapter 15, Aged Up. Aizawa looked around the classroom and mentally checked off his students, noting an absence of his two most problematic students, Midoriya and Bakugo. It's going to be one of those days, isn't it? He sighed as he watched the door patiently to see what shenanigans his students had gotten up to this time. The rest of the class seemed to have noticed this as well and looked to the door as two deep voices could be heard. I don't know what your problem is. The calories aren't that big a deal in the morning anyway, said the first person who sounded distinctly like Bakugo. That's not. First of all, Kakin, it's called a milkshake, not a milk explosion. Second, stop startling Eri when I'm making her breakfast. Another voice that resembled Izuku's, but much deeper, said. The door slammed open, and two very adult versions of their classmates walked in. And last but not least, what makes you think all that sugar and dairy makes for a balanced breakfast? Izuku turned and bowed to Aizawa. As you can see, we had another incident this morning. Midoriya, their teacher started to say as he craned his head to look up at Izuku's face. The previously 5'5" bean sprout now towered at an impressive 6.5 feet tall with his frame like a professional bodybuilder. Splush, Mina shouted, cutting off their teacher. What? Izuku questioned as he turned to face his classmates. What Mina meant to say was, Toru spoke up. Take it off, she squealed. Bakugo shoved past Izuku and stomped over to his seat and took his signature position of resting his feet on top. Don't get all up in my business about my diet, mister. I don't have a cheat day, Midoriya, Bakugo shouted. So, shut up and sit down before the rest of the girls here have a heart attack. I can practically smell Frogface going into heat. Izuku blushed furiously and set Eri at her little desk before quickly placing himself in his chair and burying his face in his arms. I don't get paid enough for this, Aizawa grumbled. Paid enough for what, Aizawa-kun? Midnight giggled as she sauntered into the room to teach the first lesson of the day, with the only distinct change to Bakugo being his voice and his features becoming more hardened. One could be mistaken that there was nothing wrong. Izuku's noticeable increase in size, however. Who's the new kid? Good morning, Kiyama-sensei. Izuku lifted his head and nervously smiled. You got me a present, Eek. Midnight ran over to Izuku and pulled his head into her breasts. How did you know it was my birthday? That's Midoriya, Aizawa said as he walked out of the room, dead set on sleeping the day's crazy off. Really? Midnight tilted his head up to get a better look at it. So it is. Midnight's face reddened at the fact that she had just shoved a student's face into her chest. She pushed him back in between her bountiful chest. He's legal now, right? I think I'm about in my early 30s now, Izuku said into her chest. Midnight nodded as she pulled his head out and cupped his firm jaw. And all that time without a woman's touch. We'll have to correct that, she said with a sultry tone. Sensei, help, Izuku called out to Aizawa, who was leaving the room. Not my problem, the tired man said as he shut the door. Somehow Izuku managed to survive the day with his dignity intact. It initially startled the faculty to see Izuku in such a state, but they got used to it fairly quickly once the cause of it was known. Okay, so we're all in agreement on this, Mina whispered outside a closed door. All the 1A and 1B girls huddled together. Hurry up, I want to get some of that, Midnight hissed. The pink girl nodded and opened the door. Oh hey, Ashido-chan and Jiraiya-chan and Azui. Izuku started to stammer as women filed into his room. Call me Tsuyu, stud, the frog girl ordered as the door was shut behind them. Author's notes, because people asked for it. I have so many story ideas I just feel bad about uploading them because I don't want to look like a spaz who just keeps starting stories but never finishes them. Should I just post and leave a note at the end that those stories won't take priority over the ones I started first, and they'll get updates whenever? It's not like people can't see I'm active. Chapter 16. Dad for one. I don't care for DFO, since I dislike when stories tie every important character to the plot together like that. Oh, I'm really so and so secret brother. Well, I'm his daughter from the future. I'm the alternate timeline version of him where he lost. Then you just got the other guy who's like, hi, I worked down the corner from you and got dragged into this. Guess I'll just go be unimportant over here. Because unless there's some magical fate/destiny shit going on, then there should be a bit of randomness to life. But because I won't turn away from a good story. Dad for one. Izuku was born with a powerful pyrokinesis quirk, and while DFO did love his child, his plan to take over the world was more important. As such, he took his son's quirk from him, which coincidentally was the extra power he needed to kill All Might in their confrontation. Not that he saved himself from any pain, as it left him severely burned and crippled in the fight. But he was that much closer to succeeding. Izuku, after the news that All Might died fighting a really powerful villain, fell deeper into a depression. The strongest of the strong lost. Bad guys were running rampant. People lost faith in heroes. Then it happened one day when some bad guys broke into his apartment. They did horrible things to his mother and made him watch. They hurt them both before one of them suggested they kill her in front of him just for laughs. Izuku stopped being sad. He couldn't. There was no one there to comfort him anymore. No one left to care if he was happy or sad. So he got angry, and he pulled out the books he had written on quirks. He took a different approach. Instead of analyzing them to find out ways to improve, he found weaknesses. With lawlessness on the rise, Izuku was able to acquire a pistol relatively easily. Then one night after careful planning he struck 3 shots to the neck of the Diamond Head Gang, notorious for having think gemstones on their heads that allowed them various powers, and they were dead as his mother. For his first kill he didn't feel too terrible about it. He thought he would feel awful, but in retrospect the first death he saw was his own mother's, and she was a good, innocent woman. These were horrible villains, so why should he feel anything but contempt for them? All for one was prepping his plan to take out the last bastion of heroism, Yue, who was constantly spitting out new heroes in the hopes that they could stem the tide until a new symbol of peace could arise. He had sent Kurogiri out to collect people for his disciple Tamura Shigaraki to command, when the portal user appeared. Sir, I checked on all the locations. They're dead, Kurogiri reported. All of them, Toga, twice, Muscular. Everyone executed. Who could be doing that? Maybe that blasted Eraserhead and some of the other underground heroes? No. A camera caught a glimpse of the person in a reflection, Kurogiri said, producing a photo. He's not in any hero database. All for one gasped as he looked on the face of his own son. His progeny was systematically dismantling his empire by murder. For a moment the room was silent, before loud laughter filled the air as All for one found the true irony in the situation. Chapter 17, Super Regeneration Hero. Hey Deku, heads up. That was all the warning Izuku got before a brick slammed into his head, shattering his skull, sending blood, bone fragments and fleshy matter all over the floor. A second later, Izuku was pulling himself up. Yeah, cute. Can you knock it off? I'm trying to read. Hey Bakugu, do the thing. Some called out and Izuku just sighed and rolled his eyes. He felt a hand placed over his mouth before an explosion went off, blasting his jaw off and spraying the brick wall with his brains and gore. At least you're good as a punching bag, Katsuki cackled as he walked off from the mess he just made of another human being, using his quirk in a way that would have killed anyone else. Izuku grumbled as every day was like this. Someone would want to test his quirk in the messiest way possible. Well, I'm going home now, Izuku said as he picked himself up off the ground, since if everyone was just going to kill him, he might as well leave. And now I'm drowning, Izuku flatly said as he felt the slime ooze inside of him. The drowning in the slime actually felt like he was burning too, which was a new one for him. But he just accepted that he'd wake up eventually. That eventually was moments later when the villain was attacked by the #1 hero. Hey Deku, I'm doing the thing, Katsuki grinned. Can you just fucking dash? Izuku started to complain when he felt the hand cover his mouth before his brains exploded out the back of his skull. The blatant act of murder on camera had startled All Might enough that he deflated, but thankfully every other student in the tent was too horrified by what they just witnessed to notice that change in his size. Did he just, what the fuck, test over? All Might bellowed into the microphone. You go back to the school now, get help. All Might ordered the nearest person as he pulled out his own cell phone to hit an emergency button that would alert police, fire, and rescue to his position. He then raced out of the tent, so he missed seeing that Izuku was already picking himself up off the floor. None of the other students were looking at the monitors because many had evacuated their stomachs seeing what looked like a gruesome murder, and they didn't want to keep looking at it. What the fuck? Katsuki questioned as he took his earpiece off his head. Dude, what the hell? Izuku asked as well. Come on, man. You have got to stop doing that. It's super fucking annoying. Katsuki opened his mouth to taunt Izuku when a large mass of muscle barreled into him, and before he knew it, he was tightly bound and gagged. Katsuki Bakuga, you are under arrest. Do not move or use your quirk. All Might furiously roared at the student that just committed a murder in front of him. Then All Might turned his head to see if it was in any way possible that Izuku might still be alive for paramedics to get him to a hospital when Izuku was already walking towards him. You're alive. Yeah? Izuku came to a stop. Not that I'm complaining, but why did you hogtie Kakin? But you and he, All Might stammered while looking between the two before pantomiming, putting his hand over his mouth, then making an explosion noise, and using the other to move away from the back of his head. Oh, yeah, that. Izuku just smiled before laughing after figuring out what the problem was. Wow, yeah. I forgot none of you know about stuff like that. Man, explaining this is going to take a long time. Me, maybe? All Might gulped because this kid shouldn't even be alive right now. All Might unceremoniously dropped Katsuki onto the grass inside the tent with all the other students looking at him like he was the most disgusting human being in the world. But the first one to notice Izuku walk in after screamed and passed out. To say the lesson was a nightmare was underselling it. The system for All Might's phone for emergency services was a bit more of a priority than just the average call for help. So UA having a swarm of vehicles come pulling through their gate drew lots of attention. Not that a student panting like crazy in the first classroom they came to babbling about murder, and All Might needing help wouldn't have done it. But Izuku was sitting on a stretcher getting his vitals taken over and over while All Might, the rest of the faculty, and the 24 emergency workers watched the tape of the fight between the students. And the parents hadn't even been called yet. He died. All Might pointed to the part where the video clearly showed the contents of Izuku's skull splattering on the wall behind him. Everyone who was watching the tape nodded in agreement. Which begs the question, Nedzu said before turning. Izuku Midoriya, how the fuck are you alive? With all sense of decorum foregone just to cut to the heart of the matter. Izuku just chuckled. My quirk is super regeneration, so I don't think that I can die. This dumb bastard and pretty much all the people at my old school, including the teachers, tested various ways that my quirk would keep me from dying. Raising a hand, Izuku started to count off. I've been blown up, stabbed, bludgeoned to death, run over, poisoned, immolated, electrocuted, drowned. There was that thing in the chemistry lab where they held me down and force-fed me acid. Pretty much daily someone would use me as the punching bag for whatever they wanted. Everyone in the tent was just blinking in shock. Are you serious? Aizawa asked because this was like a horror story. He couldn't even imagine the amount of pain one had to endure. Izuku nodded. Yeah, I made a complaint to the principal at Aldera, but he said since my quirk didn't leave me with permanent injuries, it wasn't a real complaint. Katsuki just rolled so he could sit up. See, he's fine. So you can let me go now? Absolutely not. This is insane, Ken interjected. There's no justification for this. What are you talking about? It's not like he can feel pain, Katsuki protested against not being released. And we never did it to people who mattered. Oh my god, this is hell, Namiri questioned because this was the absolute most insane criminal case she was aware of and she was involved in it. Dude, I have told you over and over. It still fucking hurts, Izuku said over the shocked adults. You're just being a little bitch, Katsuki scoffed before he was lifted off the ground by some police officers. Hey, let me go. Not until we get you in a cell. Doesn't matter if he stayed dead or not, that kind of sick shit will not be tolerated, the sergeant said angrily. Nedzu clambered up Toshinori's body to be easier to see. And take this as your expulsion, regardless of what happens, you will never set foot on this campus again. Izuku just watched Katsuki squirm and struggle as he was dragged away. Huh, Izuku commented. This is the first time someone other than my mother gave a shit about me. That's weird. Anyway, can I go now, since I'm fine and all that? No, we're going to need to talk to your mother, Toshinori answered. Let her know what happened today. Oh, well, bring towels then, she's a crier. Izuku warned the faculty that they might need to dry some furniture afterwards.
So Midoriya
Mina finally spoke up after Izuku returned to the classroom that they had all pretty much been ordered to return to and seemingly forgotten about. You died. Nodding his head, Izuku went over to his desk. That I did. Happens a lot, actually. Pretty lucky that I was born with the quirk I have then. Dude, he just murdered you. Like he didn't even hesitate, Kirishima said with a shiver because he was still shaken up from what he saw. Just something people got used to. Izuku shrugged as he sat down and then wiggled, reaching behind himself as he pulled up a squishy gray piece of meat with a white chunk of bone lodged in it. Ugh, I'm going to be cleaning myself off of me for like an hour tonight. Uraraka hurried over to a trash can and hurled into it, seeing that Izuku picked a piece of his brain off his clothes. How could they? I mean, what psychopaths could become comfortable with any of this? Kyoka shouted. Probably the same way you don't get upset when someone steps on an ant. You just see others do it so much that it becomes normal, Izuku answered while pulling out his notebook on quirks, since he'd seen some of his classmates use theirs and the emergency responders had some neat ones too he wanted to document. The first time I died, air quoting himself, my teacher in 5th grade accidentally knocked me out of the 3rd-story window. When I got up, they just told everyone to keep quiet about it, and then some people wanted to test how well my quirk healed me, and it went from there. The rest of the class exchanged looks of horror because that didn't ease their worries at all. But this wouldn't be the first nor the last time that Midoriya was killed in front of them during his tenure at UA.